Hello business owners. I'm just getting done with my walk. I made this video specifically for business owners because as much as I talk about not wanting competition and all my ideas to be taken over, I really need these ideas to be taken up and taken over the same way Ford did. So that society will actually reach a point where well, I guess I personally don't really need the ideas to be taken up. I just desire for them to, because the more these ideas are taken up by society, the better things get without me having to directly improve them myself. Because at the end of the day, I can't be the only incredibly effective person around here getting everything done, making all the money. That's ultimately bad, because that leads to despotism real quick, and then I become a massive target, and I don't really want that. I ultimately would like a healthy environment of a lot of different people who are succeeding in a variety of different industries. Maybe even the same industry. I mean, yeah, ultimately even the same industry. Like, I don't really care. Like, there is enough room in the rising tide for all boats. And as much as my hyper-competitive nature wants to simply clean up all of the opportunity and leave none for anyone else, I realize that that's not how opportunity works, because opportunity is the result of human collaborative creative efforts. So for me to succeed, other people must also succeed. Otherwise, my success is going to be of a limited nature. Even in jiu-jitsu, like, ultimately trying to succeed by holding on to knowledge and, like, preventing others from gaining knowledge. Like, Gordon Ryan ultimately is going to continue winning as long as he keeps releasing instructionals, I believe. Because ultimately, what's really pushing him is the learning. Like, he's in love with jiu-jitsu, and his being in love with jiu-jitsu is what ultimately pushes him to that highest level. I think that in the same way, you have to, well, in the same way, I think that for me, I don't just want to have a bunch of money. Like, I view life as a spiritual quest to attain yourself. Like, that's kind of like what I think life is, because I'm a little bit of a hippie in that way. Like a neo-hippie, I used to call myself in high school. Because I like to fight and like wrestle, and was intensely studious, like intensely good at chemistry, mathematics, but also did psychedelics, interested in psychedelics. I believe that life is like a spiritual odyssey. Like, I'm kind of a hippie in that way as well. So it kind of, both sides come out. So ultimately, I think that life is a spiritual odyssey. And in order for me to reach the heights of my spiritual odyssey, I need to do things that have never been done, basically. I want to ultimately do what Ford did in many ways. Like, I would love to lead. I don't even care about leading. I've started, because, like, the only reason I started talking about psychedelics in the first place is because no one else is talking about them. Like, people aren't talking about them enough. And, like, I was like, oh, I'll just position myself to, no, I'm the hippie guy. Just to whatever degree I am popular, I am the guy who's introducing new ideas. Because if I'm not doing that, I'm just not being true to myself. Like, that is just who I am. I'm the guy who's interested in the ideas that no one else has ever heard of. If I'm not, well, I am. So I have to talk about that stuff. So again, psychedelics falls into that category, because, like, people just aren't talking about it. Like, Joe Rogan won't really push the issue. I mean, he pushes it a bit, but, like, who's ultimately going to talk about psychedelics in the next generation? I think it's ultimately got to be, I don't know. So I was talking about them because I think that it ultimately it benefits the world. Like, we need to play our roles. So me in my spiritual odyssey, I need to play the role that I've been allotted, and that role is to truthfully share what I'm doing and what I've done and why I've done that and my reasoning for doing that with people, because I guess, like, when I do that, I don't know, I'm an older brother, so I've kind of done that my whole life. And then also, like, when I do that, I do get positive reinforcement, generally speaking, so there is some degree of dopaminergic function going on here about sharing ideas. But also, though, I simply have realized that because I view life as this spiritual odyssey and this spiritual journey of attainment, and because also if I don't talk about the things that I'm interested in, then no one's going to, because ultimately I'm the only person who's interested in all the things that I'm interested in, because I'm the only person who's me, then I won't be able to have a life full of the things I'm interested in if I don't talk about the things that I'm interested in. So what I'm doing on this YouTube channel is simply sharing all of the ideas at a surface level, and then going into them as I do based on my interest, and then probably creating courses based on demand. And ultimately, maybe just making courses based on what I want to understand deeper too. I mean, I think that's probably the real way to do it, because that's how the supplements kind of come along. But ultimately, I don't just want to make supplements my entire life. Like, I would love to write books as well. I would love to travel. I would love to develop new and interesting chemical syntheses. I'd love to talk to lots of different people about optimal ways of healing the human brain, and how we can use healing the human brain in order to prevent degeneration, in order to enhance regenerative function, enhance creative function, enhance the expressions of strength and vitality within our bodies. Just like, there's so much we could do, there's so much I could do, that I can't do it all on my own. So I'm ultimately realized that I need to just simply share all of my information as quickly as it comes to me via my YouTube channel. And then people who use this information to benefit themselves will find it, consume it, use it, implement it in their lives, benefit themselves, and then ultimately you'll have this outward rippling effect. Like Owen Cook, look at Owen Cook. He's a great example of someone who's ultimately affected entire industries with his work. Tony Robbins is another example. Alexander Shulgin is another example. Tim Ferriss. Like, there's lots of people out there, if you look at them, the effect that they've had is this massive ripple effect that they're ultimately still riding. I ultimately see that as the true vine that Jesus talks about. It's this actual creative undercurrent in society, in culture, that brings together coherently all of the ideas in a manner that is unified within the generative human experience. Because it's not enough for us to simply exist with human bodies, but we must participate in the patterns of life, or those that we participate around and with will ultimately die off, and then we won't have anyone to remember us, and we will fall away and not be remembered. And the real problem with that, it's not really a problem, it's just what happens. But if you do that, then no one remembers your ideas. So then your ideas aren't, like Dante, the ideas in the Divine Comedy, the ideas in the Aeneid by Virgil, the ideas in the Odyssey, these are the ideas that are passed down through victorious cultures, and these are the ideas that outlast civilizations. But if you want to build your ideas on Polly the meth head, then your ideas won't last very long, because Polly the meth head just overdosed last Tuesday. So it's just really a matter of, like, your continued existence and how present you want to be for whatever remains of it. And that's really up to you. But I have children, so I'm really fundamentally invested in continued generation and creative expression of the human spirit, because I don't know what else I would do. I mean, I call this kleos. The Greeks called it kleos, arete. Dumbledore called it eternal glory. It is everything. I mean, what else is there if not the attainment of the human spirit and the joy that can be expressed through the human soul? Like, I love it's not in Vision Quest. It's not the 6 minutes. It's what happens in them. He's talking about Pele. He's talking about. I'll try my best to recreate that, but it really touched me. I remember Dana White talking about it again. But Pele is talking about going to see Pele and crying in the middle of the match, and having everyone in the arena also like crying and standing on their feet and being completely overwhelmed with joy that a member of the human species that he happened to be a part of could do that. He's like, it's not the 6 minutes, it's what happens in them. And I think that too is the point of life. And I think ultimately we find that within ourselves, and we find that within our daily willingness to engage. Like I've often said to myself, there is no ADCC. ADCC is every day. There is no opponent. There's only myself. There is no ADCC. The ADCC is every day. If I win every day, I win the ADCC. I'll repeat these mantras to myself. This will be a metaphor for my journey through life, my determination to win a world championship in Nogi Grappling, the world championship in Nogi Grappling, the ADCC, 185-pound weight class, or whatever the hell that is a vision, because to be able to do that, to have a member of my family, to have a member of the human species be able to unite himself to do that, like watching Marcelo Garcia, it's that crazy self-belief. Like, even though like I broke my arm on this journey, like I broke or injured the inside of my groin healed in this journey. I've had concussions, I've had finger injuries, hand injuries, I've had setback, I've had erectile dysfunction, I've had depression, I've had insomnia, I've shit myself, I've puked, I have sweat myself to death in a trash bag, and I have had tears freeze on my face while I ran outside in the freezing cold. To do all of that and persevere anyway, like, that is beautiful. It's like Spartacus. It's that spirit in Spartacus that ultimately overcomes the Romans. But this is why jiu-jitsu is ultimately better than wrestling, because you need to survive as well. You need to be able to generate family. You need to be able to win the ADCC as a father with children, as a married father with children. If you can do that, you don't divorce your wife, you raise your kids while you're doing this shit, you have your business, you actually create a generative structure. I don't know, this is my insane idea. Then you can do anything. Like, then I believe that I create a new nation, that I will literally build an idea that itself will be like Aeneas' founding of Rome. I need to read the Aeneid because I think it's very inspiring that someone wrote a story about someone founding Rome. But I believe that I am doing this. I believe I'm doing this by this focus of my will. Because to focus my will in this way and make this creative expression of structure and focus generative, not just surviving, but generative, while dominating, capable of survival, generation, and overcoming, then I will ultimately have created a new pattern in reality. I don't even think, I've even decided to found this idea before my birth. I've said, this idea could not even have began with my birth, but is merely the realization in my physical body of the will of my fathers. And within me, as within them, their will has found expression and united itself to coherent expression of this that is my purpose, which is the generation of a new nation that I am merely articulating because the pattern must be deeper than myself. Who even knows? Like, who even knows? This is just the fun game that I like to play. And this little game has, like, as earth as it is in heaven, having all these patterns expressed at the macro as in the micro as well, training them at the macro and the micro. It's ultimately just the way life exists. And when I realized that, I gave me the confidence to share every single idea that I could possibly articulate on YouTube, because I was like, okay, all I'm doing, it's like when I meditate, I just create space for awareness, and the awareness manifests. I allow awareness to effortlessly subside into its source. It becomes aware of itself. In the same way, I optimize myself through my business, making those means available as the business produces. I just simply, like, it's like a Horcrux, but a generative Horcrux. I wonder if you pick up what I'm doing. Like I say, okay, let's think if you made a meme of yourself. Like someone was like, I really like to make things out of wood. Or like, I really like to talk to people about why their brain's dysfunctional. Or like, I really like to optimize, blah, 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 blah. You take that self-knowledge, and then you put yourself in a situation where excessively doing that is generative. I'll use the example of a prostitute because everyone kind of understands this. So the prostitute becomes better at business by ultimately like recording himself. It's like they're like, like I really like to like, and this is ultimately like a terrible example. I've just been watching a lot of podcasts with like OnlyFans people on them. So I was thinking about this, and I was like, but it ultimately, like, I'll explain why that's a bad example, because ultimately it's not generative behavior. So they're ultimately taking a behavior that leads to alienation, and then they're making the alienating behavior more widely accessible in a way that generates money. But it's ultimately dopamine. I mean, the reason it works is because they get dopamine from masturbating. If they masturbate on OnlyFans, they get more, like, they take the same dopamine-driven activity, but everyone kind of understands it because you literally film masturbating, and it's like, but it's bad. Don't do that. So take Ford, for instance. Ford noticed that power could be created and utilized through the combustion of fossil fuels, and that ultimately people spent an inordinate amount of time tending to horses. I think he said he grew up on a farm, probably spent all his time tending to horses. So he's like, I hate tending to horses and I like fiddling with engines. I'm gonna figure out a way to make engines replace horses. And they just kept on doing that to the point where we revolutionized society. That's an example that is good. So I ultimately like talking, and I like literally, I love talking, and I love researching neuroscientific ideas and their applications towards optimization, and testing those in terms of making supplements that I then take myself, and seeing how this affects my performance in jiu-jitsu and my mental performance in jiu-jitsu as well, because jiu-jitsu requires this conjunction of physical and mental performance and like optimization of myself and my training over time. So then I basically have taken that and I've turned that into Weak to Warrior, which is, it ultimately allows me to share my ideas via YouTube, which I've realized is the most productive way that I can create, because I'm training myself to communicate. My ideas can ultimately be stolen, which is useful for myself because then I'm creating something that's useful. My supplements can be taken, it's the same basic idea. And I'm ultimately creating media that can be consumed. It's kind of like valuetainment. I've realized that there's a huge market for just free associative thought process, like ideas like, this is just my train of thought and I'm going to enjoy talking. And by me enjoying talking, I'm going to explore a bunch of ideas, see what comes up. And I literally just made a metaphor about like OnlyFans. And like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just talking. And then people find it entertaining, they watch the entire video, they get value from it. And ultimately, over time, as people see the value of the ideas, and then ultimately as they try to study and copy my business ideas, because that's what I've noticed, is that everyone's trying to copy everyone's business model by watching all their stuff and then trying to copy it. So ultimately, if I just realize that ahead of time, make tons of videos that people can then watch. I've like run out of videos before. I remember like Elliot Hall, so I used to just I ran out of videos to watch of Elliot and Owen and like Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna. I just watched everything. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I didn't even realize that was possible. So I'm just making as much content as I can, because A, that'll make me better at making content. B, it search optimizes itself. C, there's a huge intimidation factor involved in this as well. I love intimidating business rivals and just everyone, because I've realized that that's a lot of life. Like, the more intimidating I seem, the more I am Oz, the great and powerful. The more I can create multi-level marketing, basically. I mean, this is all what it is. It's multi-level marketing, but you do it around a basis of mastery. And like, I'll explain it, for instance, like if you're looking at a brief way that this works. So I make large amounts of content, and then the minority of people who watch all of the content on YouTube will watch all of my content, which will then make it appear in everyone's feeds, which will then search optimize it even more, which will then create the longest lasting viewer base, because those are ultimately the people who are going to try to make a living off of cutting content to then release it. So now I'm making content that becomes part of people's content libraries for God knows however many different health, business, philosophical, Terrence McKenna commentary purposes. So now I have the longest and broadest impact from which to create my pyramid-like peak, because ultimately, once you, like, everyone's trying to peak, but no one's trying to base. So you just base, and then the peak comes way in the future. You just create these series of subsequent peaks, which is ultimately what I'm trying to do with my training, because I don't want to make my training steroid based. I want to make it, I want to make my competition an emergent property of my incredibly good health and training principles. In the same way that I want my viewership to be an emergent, like I want the spikes in my viewership to be an emergent property of those few people who watch all of my content for its value to them, because they're trying to just study me for whatever reason, the same way I studied people in the past. Pass it on, you know, that's the spirit. And in that same way, I'll also get the most skilled at making content. So whenever I make incredibly targeted content that is specifically meant for a specific purpose, that content is taken, search engine optimized, and consumed, as well as having what is effectively prime time in the form of continued daily viewership. And this is also motivation for anyone out there who is struggling to figure out, like, how do I continue to go every day? How do I keep on motivating myself? Because I have such limited results. Just keep going. Like, the fact that you can keep going itself creates a skill that you can use in any endeavor. Like, my ability to do this is ultimately something I taught myself when I was wrestling in high school. Like, I was wrestling in high school, I just stopped focusing on everything else. I was like, I'm just gonna wrestle. And that trained me. I was literally like, well, why am I doing that? Because what if I don't succeed in wrestling? And like, what is success? I mean, ultimately, I wasn't a world champion. I wasn't even a state champion. But, I mean, I won states jiu-jitsu, local jiu-jitsu tournaments. But, and I did very well in wrestling. I mean, I got second in the state in a weight class above my own. Like, I'm so happy with how I did. Like, my performance is legendary. And ultimately, in the future, when you study the people that I wrestled and the people they wrestled and the people we all beat, I'm gonna go down on one of the greatest in history. Even if I don't win ADCC, who cares? I'm the greatest in my own mind, which is ultimately what matters, is being a legend in your own mind. Because that's where you have to live. Like, I heard people be like, Devin's a legend in his own mind. And I'd be like, damn straight. Like, where else are you gonna be a legend? Your mind? excuse me, I don't want to live shit real estate. But anyway, so ultimately be a legend in your own mind. Believe in yourself. I don't really care about putting down anyone who's trying, but of the people who don't try, who love to put down others, I just want to build like a Nietzschean empire of like Hyperborea. Like, go look at like the Hyperborea quotes of Nietzsche. I find those tremendously inspiring. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to give embodiment to the Nietzschean ideas that have ultimately inspired me. Like, I love Nietzsche's quotes. I want to read a lot of Nietzsche's quotes. I'll probably make a video of me reading Nietzsche's quotes. Let me know in the comments what kind of quotes you'd like me to get into, or like what kind of quotes you find interesting, so I can comment on that and I can make like just longer form content where I continue to engage with my own ideas ultimately, because this is ultimately about me and my ideas and the development of my ideas, and then y'all seeing how I develop my ideas on my own journey to success. Because if I claim to be developing your ideas, that doesn't make any sense. I'm developing my ideas. I'm Devin Young, goddammit, and I will develop my own ideas. You can develop your ideas, and if you want to learn from me, then more power to you. But creating the ability for myself to do that, and giving you guys the ability to learn from that, giving YouTube the ability to optimize itself, learning, engaging every day, sharing all my ideas, and putting them up there for you guys on a continuing basis so you guys can continue to study me and study the principles that I use to succeed, is ultimately something that is itself, it doesn't make me successful, but it gives me skills that I use to become successful. And it's this feedback loop where I have this continued viewership, which honestly doesn't provide me with any sales, but it provides me with the skills to continue engaging. And here's the thing though, like when I go to supplement stores to sell people supplements, like sell supplement store owners supplements, this is the, like, where the good advice is. Like, they don't know that I don't sell anything through YouTube. So then they buy from me. They're like, oh wow, he must be making all these sales off the internet because this stuff is obviously selling. Whether or not, who even knows if I've sold anything that month? But they ultimately buy because the branding's amazing, everything's amazing, and the YouTube channel exists, and then people on YouTube are like, wow, this stuff's really popular. I'm gonna go buy this stuff. So it's ultimately like in jiu-jitsu, like combat itself is an illusion. I simply create this illusion of business, which isn't an illusion. It is real business, but it's like a magic trick because you need human attention. But it's like, how do you get human attention? Like, you sitting there watching this in your cubicle, why are you stuck? Like, I'll literally like break it down simply. Like, why are you stuck? You're stuck because you're giving me and others your attention. But why? And it's not even bad that you're giving me your attention, because I actually know what to do with it. And I'll tell you why I know what to do with it. Because I've succeeded. Well, I've succeeded at what? I've succeeded at gaining my own self-attention. I meditate. I have my own ideas. I become interested in my own ideas. And I have, through reinforcement of this, been able to turn my ideas into a business so I can continue to justify working on my own ideas. And I continue to do this and then share the ideas to make the business more layered so that there's more nuance to working on the ideas. So that now there's latency in the distribution of the ideas to create a wider ripple for the spread of the ideas through the business. Continuing to do this over time creates a much larger effect in my life and in my broader social circle and in the YouTube social circle and in the social circle of world history ultimately, so that I get attention, so that my ideas get attention, so that my business gets attention, so that my family gets attention, so that I ultimately build this nation, this Hyperborea that Nietzsche talked about. Nietzsche, again, is just doing the same thing. He turned his ideas inwards so that I keep directing my ideas to Nietzsche so that I can gain the strength through coherency. Like, the coherent ability to express your ideas is strength. It's the eternal strength, the internal strength of the Prince Rupert drop that then grants you the resistance needed to move. That then allows you to not become ultimately stuck, and then you can move and learn and discover and manifest your own ideas. Ultimately, I don't even need all of these ideas to make sense and to be completely coherent right now. If you're listening to all this stuff and you're like, this sounds interesting, this guy's clearly very engaged, but all these ideas don't actually quite go together. I mean, I'm sure they do, but he hasn't put them all together. He's merely expressing his own desire to continue to work on the ideas for their continued coherence through expressive expansion. Why, yes, of course, that is what I'm doing. But the reason I'm doing that is because it's art. If I could reduce everything that I'm saying to a single articulated idea, then I would do that. But I can't, so I continue to express it through the emotional current that I tap into as a result of the creative process of making the video. It's an act of faith, people. I have faith in my continued ability to creatively express and in the utility of doing that. It's all about creating greater engagement, and that engagement makes me create, and that creativity itself is generative. The mere fact that I am expressing my ideas in English actually makes ideas themselves more coherent, even when those ideas have their root in the emotions that motivated the generative process of creativity. The way you can apply this in your life is just start creating. When you create, you'll notice that you have ideas. Just start doing. If that leads to you destroying the canvas and having to start again, good, just do that. Do that again and again. You'll have more energy every day. The energy will lead to greater ideas. The greater ideas will ultimately get messed up because you don't have the skill yet to express them. But your continued discipline to work at the expression of those ideas will give you the skill to express the ideas that come to you as a result of your faith to continue trying to engage, which itself is engagement. Done.